So, I want you to picture three things that, at least on the surface, seem to have absolutely zero connection to one another.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What are we picturing?
First, visualize a freezing cold attic in Alaska where this bizarre physics anomaly is taking place.
Right, okay.
Second, picture a really dense forest in India where a pack of wild wolves is actively raising a pair of human children.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And third, visualize the geopolitical collapse of the Soviet Union.
I mean, that sounds like the setup to a riddle. Or, maybe the plot of a very surreal thriller movie.
It really does, right. But what if I told you there is an actual argument out there, like a grand unified theory of everything, that claims all three of those wildly different scenarios are governed by the exact same universal law?
I'd say that is exactly the architecture we're mapping out today.
Exactly.
So we are taking a deep dive into a translated 2019 essay by an author named Swiffen, and it's titled The Purer, the More Stable.
Such a fascinating title.
It is. And the mission of this deep dive is to explore this incredibly sweeping, far-reaching philosophical theory the author has constructed. I mean, the core premise is right there in the title.
Right. Purity equals stability.
Exactly. The author is attempting to prove that this single rule dictates literally everything. How physics works, how biology operates, how we achieve spiritual enlightenment, how businesses succeed, and even why global superpowers inevitably rise and fall.
It is a massive, wild ride of an essay, honestly.
Wow.
But before we dive into the mechanics of this theory, we do need to set some quick ground rules for how we are going to navigate this material.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Because it goes to some pretty intense places, right?
It does. We need to be very transparent with you, the listener, right up front. This essay contains some highly provocative claims.
Right.
It ventures deeply into specific religious interpretations, and it makes very strong, very direct critiques of capitalism, mixed economies, and various global socialist states.
Right, and we need to be clear about our role here.
Yeah. Exactly. Our goal here is not to endorse the author's political viewpoints, and we aren't here to debate their religious ideology either.
Yeah, we're staying totally neutral.
Our job is simply to impartially unpack the source material. We just want to show you the internal logic of how this author connects these wildly disparate ideas into one unified theory so you can understand the mechanics of their argument.
Makes sense. Okay, let's get right into the physical evidence, because the author doesn't start with abstract philosophy or politics.
No, they start with something very concrete.
Very tangible. The essay points to a news report from the Daily Mail back in January 2019.
Okay.
There's this man named Roderick Cooper, and he's living in Alaska. Up in his attic, the temperature has dropped to minus 22 degrees Celsius.
Which is incredibly cold.
Extremely cold. But he has these 2 bottles of bottled water up there, and the water simply refuses to freeze.
Wait, really? Just liquid?
Completely liquid. It defies the temperature of the room entirely.
So, the author cites this documented scientific phenomenon, which is actually known as supercooling, to lay the absolute foundation for their entire theory.
Right, because normally water freezes at 0 degrees.
Exactly. But for water to freeze-like, for liquid molecules to actually lock together and form an ice crystal, those molecules usually need a template. They need something to latch onto.
Like a speck of dust or something.
Yeah, exactly. A tiny imperfection like dust, a mineral, or some kind of impurity in the water. That acts as what scientists call a nucleation site for the ice crystal to begin growing.
But because the water in those specific bottles up in Alaska was incredibly pure, there was virtually nothing for the ice to grab onto.
Right. The molecules are definitely cold enough to freeze, but they lack that structural trigger.
So the purity of the water allowed it to perfectly resist the external environment. Even at minus 22 degrees, the sheer lack of impurities kept the liquid stable in its current state.
Which is wild. And the author looks at this physics principle that extreme purity creates extreme stability against outside forces, and uses it as the jumping-off point for everything else.
Which brings us to the author's first massive leap, right? Biology and animal behavior.
Yes.
The essay just pivots from freezing water in Alaska to how wild animals react to human babies.
It's quite the transition.
It really is. The author points out that animals we normally consider highly dangerous predators or wild beasts like wolves, tigers, dogs, horses, cattle, sheep, they become incredibly docile around human infants.
They don't just tolerate them either.
No, the author describes them as becoming affectionate and instinctively protective.
And to back this up, the author pulls from both mythology and historical accounts. Like, they start with the founding myth of Rome.
Oh, right, Romulus and Remus.
Exactly. So King Numitor is on the throne, but his brother Amulius usurps him. And Amulius is paranoid about being overthrown in the future, so he forces his niece, Sylvia, to become a Vestal Virgin priestess.
So she can never have children who might challenge his rule.
Right. But she secretly falls in love with Mars, the god of war, and gives birth to twins.
And Emilius is not happy about that.
Not at all. He finds out, executes Sylvia, and orders the babies to be thrown into the Tiber River. They wash ashore, and instead of being eaten by the local
A
wildlife,
female wolf hears them crying.
yes, she comes over, licks them dry, takes them to her cave, and actually nurses them.
And, I mean, obviously that is a myth, but the author immediately follows it up with real-world documented examples.
Yeah, the Midipol case.
Right. They cite this famous event from 1920 in a town called Midipol in India. Locals discovered what they initially thought were, like, human-like monsters walking on all fours, trailing behind a pack of wolves.
Which sounds terrifying.
It does. But when they finally captured them, they realized it was two naked human girls who had been completely integrated into the wolf pack since they were babies.
Wow. And it's not just an isolated incident, according to the author.
No, they also point to scientific data compiled up through the 1950s documenting 30 different children who were raised by wild beasts. 30. We're talking 5 raised by bears, 1 by a leopard, 14 by wolves, and others by monkeys and sheep.
So the author is building a really clear pattern here.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this. It all comes back to that Alaskan attic. It's like dropping a single grain of sand into a perfectly still glass of supercooled water.
Right. The water instantly crystallizes and freezes.
Yes. The author is saying a baby is like that pure water. There is no impurity in a baby.
No malice.
Right. If we look at the psychological mechanism the author is suggesting here, it's fascinating. An animal usually attacks based on specific triggers.
Like smelling fear, which tells it you are prey.
Or it senses malice and complex aggression, which tells it you're a threat. But a human baby possesses absolutely none of those complex emotional states.
The baby is a blank slate.
Exactly. Because the grain of sand-like, the human complexity hasn't been introduced yet, the predator's instinct has nothing to latch onto.
The animal's aggression remains supercooled.
Boom.
Exactly. So we see how purity creates physical stability in inanimate objects and biological stability in living creatures.
But what happens when you introduce consciousness and the human soul?
Right, this is where the essay scales up to the metaphysical.
The author leans on a very intuitive metaphor here, gemstones.
Oh, I like this one.
If you look at any gemstone in nature, its value is entirely dictated by its purity. The fewer the flaws, the higher the price.
Makes total sense.
The author asserts that human beings operate on that exact same metric spiritually. People who are pure and simple are loved, cherished, and valued by the environment around them.
And the complex people.
People who are complex, layered, and full of competing desires, the author argues they are inherently rejected or hated by their environment.
And the chemistry analogy they use here is honestly brilliant. They point to the noble gases on the periodic table.
Right, helium, neon, argon, krypton, xenon, and radon.
Yeah, noble gases are unique because they are chemically inert. They have a completely full outer shell of electrons.
So they don't need anything else. Exactly. Because their atomic structure is perfectly balanced and self-contained, they don't need to bond with any other elements. They are entirely pure.
And because of that purity, they are incredibly stable and almost completely immune to outside chemical influence.
They just don't react.
Yeah.
And the author argues that human spiritual stability works the exact same way.
The essay then brilliantly synthesizes this chemistry with ancient religious texts, which is a wild jump.
Yeah, they point out that Jesus explicitly taught that to enter the kingdom of heaven, you must become like a child.
And Lao Tzu, the ancient Chinese philosopher, taught that if you want to unite with the Tao, you must return to the state of infancy.
I want to introduce a specific argument the author focuses heavily on here. The idea is that showing your pure nature is the exact equivalent of becoming a celestial being or a Buddha.
Right.
Entering heaven has absolutely nothing to do with reading classic books. It has nothing to do with accumulating wisdom or doing good deeds or burning incense. It is purely about stripping away complexity.
So the mechanism of enlightenment, according to this theory, is subtraction, not addition.
Right.
You don't learn your way into heaven, you unlearn your way into it.
Okay, I have to push back on this, though. And I want you, listener, right now, to think about this critically, too.
Go for it.
Wait, isn't human complexity exactly what makes us empathetic, creative, or even interesting?
That's the counter-argument, yeah.
If we completely return to a state of infancy-like, a state of total simplicity. Are we really achieving spiritual enlightenment, or are we just becoming a blank slate?
Right.
Honestly, this feels like a lobotomy disguised as nirvana. It feels like we'd be erasing the very things that make the human experience worthwhile.
You're hitting on the exact reason this essay is so controversial and, frankly, why it feels a bit insulting to our lived human experience. We value our complex lives. But the author views all of that rich experience you just mentioned as friction
Just friction.
to the author. Creativity, complex empathy, and the accumulation of experiences are the exact impurities that make us unstable. They are the dust in the water that causes the ice to form.
Wow.
To the author, a blank slate isn't an empty void, it is the ultimate state of grace. It's the noble gas. It is impervious to suffering because there is literally nothing for the suffering to attach to.
That is heavy. So just when you think you've wrapped your head around this purely philosophical kind of self-help interpretation, the author scales this law of purity up again.
Things get even bigger.
Way bigger. We go from the individual soul to human organizations, businesses, and eventually global superpowers.
The author starts with everyday life to prove this is a universal law. Think about personal friendships.
Okay.
Most friendships start out very pure. You just enjoy each other's company. But they inevitably collapse when interests are added.
Like what?
Like when networking, money, favors, or social climbing enter the dynamic. The friendship becomes complex. It becomes impure, and the friction tears it apart.
The essay points out that companies fail for the exact same reason when they dilute their core purpose.
Yeah, the business application.
Like a company that provides food might be highly successful, but then they get distracted. They start investing in real estate or playing the stock market or getting involved in political lobbying.
The scope creep.
Exactly. So what does this all mean? It's like a beloved local burger joint suddenly deciding they also want to serve sushi, and while you're eating your meal, they offer to do your taxes.
That sounds like a terrible restaurant.
Right. The complexity completely ruins the purity of what made the business work in the first place. The original stability is destroyed by the new variables.
And that loss of stability brings us to the most provocative section of the essay, which is geopolitics.
Here we go.
The author looks at the macro level of human organization, specifically analyzing socialist states. And they explicitly name Romania, Yugoslavia, the Soviet Union, Venezuela, Vietnam, and China.
Let's tread carefully here and just strictly map out the author's argument.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The author claims that all of these nations collapsed, or in some cases are currently collapsing, because their systems became impure.
Impure how?
Well, the author explicitly states their belief that, quote, pure socialism is definitely superior to capitalism.
No.
But their core argument is that these countries didn't keep their systems pure.
They mixed them.
Exactly. They took socialism, which is based on collective ownership, and mixed it with market economics, which is based on individual profit.
Right.
Then they added family interests like nepotism alongside political party interests and corruption.
And the author has a very specific term for this, right? They call this a four unlikes system.
Yes.
It's a massive geopolitical hybrid that tries to be too many things at once.
And if we look at the mechanics of how hybrid like that trumbles, it goes right back to the Alaskan attic. You have four entirely different sets of instructions trying to run the same machine.
Competing variables.
The state mandates equality.
Yeah.
The market demands profit. The family demands loyalty. And the party demands survival. The competing incentives create massive internal friction.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because it is a hybrid, because it is incredibly complex and impure, the author argues it inevitably shatters under the universal law of the purer, the more stable. A system with that many competing variables just cannot survive the pressure of time and human nature.
Which is honestly a terrifying thought when you scale it back down to the individual listener.
It really is.
Think about it. If giant resource-rich nations fail because they become too complex, what does this mean for you?
Right.
You probably spend every single day trying to gain more knowledge, build more experience, and navigate a really complicated modern world. Are you just actively making yourself more unstable?
That is the ultimate paradoxical trap the author lays out in the final segment of the essay. And to illustrate this, they introduce a brilliant proverb: flies always find the cracked eggs.
Ooh. In this theory, a crack is a metaphor for complexity and impurity. If you are a seamless, perfectly pure egg, the flies, which represent, external troubles, drama, betrayal, failure, They just leave you alone. There's no opening for them.
The smooth surface gives them literally nothing to latch onto.
But the moment you crack, the moment you introduce complexity into your life, the flies swarm. You invite the chaos in.
And the author grounds this proverb in a personal anecdote, actually.
Oh, right, the Lifechanyuan group.
Yeah. They mention founding an organization called Lifechanyuan. And as they observed the people joining and leaving this community over time, they noticed a distinct pattern in the behavior.
What kind of pattern?
The thinkers, the intellectuals with complex minds who analyzed every rule and doctrine, they were easily disturbed by external factors. They became disillusioned, or they found philosophical reasons to argue, and they eventually left the organization.
But the simple-minded people.
They stayed. They remained entirely stable within the community because they didn't overanalyze their environment.
So, because of this observation, we arrive at the grand ultimate paradox.
What's fascinating here is how counterintuitive it is.
Totally. According to the essay, the more knowledgeable you are, the more capable, experienced, flexible, and smart you are, the more unreliable you become.
It completely flips the script on how modern society values human development. We are constantly taught to be adaptable, to learn from our varied experiences, to be critical thinkers.
Right.
But the author argues that by becoming complex, you violate the fundamental law of stability. A complex person sees multiple angles to every problem. They have competing interests and nuanced thoughts.
So they're a cracked egg.
Exactly. Because of that, a highly intelligent person might vow absolute loyalty to you today and completely betray you tomorrow when new information arises. They are inherently unstable.
And here's where it gets really interesting. The author lands on a deeply provocative conclusion to wrap up the essay.
Oh, this quote is wild.
They state plainly that the most complex thinkers are actually the most silly and stupid people in the world. Now, we really have to point out the staggering irony of this. The author Swiffen has written this deeply complex, historically layered, philosophically dense, incredibly analytical essay spanning physics, biology, theology, and global politics, purely to argue that being complex and intellectual is a terrible idea.
It is a profound paradox.
They used a massive amount of intellectual horsepower to essentially tell us that intellectual horsepower is a cracked egg.
They really did.
Yeah.
But, despite the irony, it forces you to deeply interrogate your own life.
Yeah, it does.
The author has taken us on this massive journey. We started with the physics of supercooled water in Alaska, where a lack of impurities defied the freezing environment.
Then the feral children.
Right, we examined feral children in India, protected by the purity of their innocence. We looked at the chemical inertness of noble gases, the spiritual teachings of Jesus and Lao Tzu, the failure of complex business models, and the geopolitical collapse of global superpowers when they dilute their core systems.
Just massive, sweeping concepts.
And we ended on the idea that being too smart makes you fundamentally unreliable.
It is just a phenomenal amount of information to process.
It is. So I want to pose a question directly to you, the listener.
Let's hear it.
The next time you are feeling entirely overwhelmed by the moving parts of your life, maybe it's the intense demands of your career, the complicated dynamics of your personal relationships, or just the sheer volume of information you have to process every single day. Ask yourself about the mechanics of your stress.
Yeah.
Is adding more variables to the equation the answer? Or do you need to aggressively strip things away? Do you need to find your pure state to regain your stability?
It's a really powerful framework for decluttering your life. But I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, building on everything we've just discussed about the mechanisms of purity.
Okay.
If absolute purity leads to ultimate stability, just like that super cold water sitting perfectly still in that freezing Alaskan attic, doesn't that also mean you were completely frozen in place?
Well,
If nothing can influence you, you can never change. So is the ultimate goal of life really to be perfectly, safely stable and untouched? Or is the messy, painful, highly complicated impurity of life the exact thing that creates friction, causes reactions, and actually drives human evolution and progress forward?